Donald Trump is going to save Khamzat Chimaev's UFC career.
Can you fight anywhere in the world? Can you fight in the U.S.?
Of course.
You can.
Yeah, let Donald Trump win the fight now, so I will be there.
For years, UFC fans have speculated that Chimaev's inactivity and lack of a title shot has all been due to the fact he can't enter the United States legally.
Chimaev can't get into the U.S. because he has visa issues.
The rumor is his ties to Ramzan Kadyrov, the Russian warlord accused of committing war crimes, anti-gay purges, and much, much more, have caused a lot of visa issues for Chimaev. It supposedly stopped him fighting in the US and made the UFC hesitant to put him in title contention as a result. But now, that could all change, and there will be one man to thank: Donald Trump. When Khamzat Chimaev joined the UFC back in 2020, he was known for one main thing: activity. He broke the record for the quickest time between UFC wins in just 10 days. It didn't matter where the fight was, who it was against, or what weight class it was in. Chimaev was going to turn up and steal the show.
66 days ago, well, technically I guess it's like 68 now, he won his debut in July. 66 days later, he's 3-0. But DC, what about these numbers? Total strikes: 124-2 against John Phillips in his debut, 68-0 against Reese McKee, and 4-0 against Gerald Meerschaert. He knocks Gerald Meerschaert out.
It didn't take many more.
But then, all of a sudden, his activity just dropped out of nowhere. After 3 fights in the first 66 days of being a UFC fighter, it took Chimaev 2 entire years to have 3 more. And sure, there were injuries and health problems during that time, but fans speculated there was a much more sinister reason as to why we weren't seeing the UFC's new superstar compete all that often.
I even saw the Chechen leader, how do you say his? Ramzan?
Ramzan, yeah.
He surprised you with a Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah, actually gave me 3 times.
3 Benzes?
Three Benzes?
Yeah.
As his stardom grew, the head of the Chechen Republic, Ramzan Kadyrov, decided to befriend Chimaev and celebrate his success as a Chechen-born fighter. Kadyrov gifted Chimaev 3 Mercedes-Benzes, attended Chimaev's wedding, and there's even rumors that when he tried to retire due to his COVID-induced illness, Kadyrov forced him to continue fighting.
Did he talk to you when you were trying to retire too?
Yeah, he did. He called me. What's wrong, Jan? They said maybe cancer, maybe not. He said, no, you're not cancer. Come on, come back home and we help you. And then you're gonna go. Promise me, I'm gonna help you with being healthy. Promise me you come back to the cage. I said, okay, brother, we do it.
But Kadyrov is an incredibly controversial figure. Since leading the Chechen Republic since 2007, he has been accused of owning a private prison, controlling his own violent army, orchestrating the mass murder of homosexual men in Chechnya, pushing the Russian invasion of Ukraine forward, and so much more.
У нас таких людей нету. Нету у нас геев. Если есть, заберите в Канаду, хвала Аллаху, подальше от нас. Аузу билляхи минаш шайтанир раджим, чтобы не было, чтобы очистили кровь, если есть таких, пусть забирают.
Although Chimaev is seemingly friendly with Kadyrov on the face of it, he may feel afraid to turn down the offers in fear of what would happen. But either way, the US and nations of the European Union have sanctioned Kadyrov and his associates from entering their countries, and the MMA world believes Chimaev has been included in that punishment. Because from late 2020 to 2022, Chimaev fought 4 times in the UFC, with 3 of them being based in the United States. But since then, he's exclusively fought in Abu Dhabi, hasn't been seen even visiting America, and is even rumored to have applied for citizenship to the UAE, perhaps to get around his current travel issues.
Here is a guy who has changed nationality. He left his country, his adopted country anyway, in Sweden. He's now in, I believe, part of the UAE.
He's had a lot of COVID, to be fair.
He had a terrible bout with COVID. He's been inconsistent. He can't get to the United States to remain active. There's actually a ton of unknown about Khamzat Chimaev.
And even though his more recent performances against the likes of Kamaru Usman and, of course, tearing through Robert Whittaker have been incredible, Chimaev only fought once in 2023 and once in 2024. His activity has fallen off a cliff, but the problem is actually far deeper, because even the UFC isn't sure what to do with him. But before we continue with the video, we have a quick shout out from our friends over at Late Night Fights. They're a brand new MMA-focused YouTube channel that deep dives into the losses of some of the greatest, most famous and dominant fighters of all time. The channel is just getting started, but they already have a great catalog of videos to check out, so feel free to go give them a watch and hit subscribe over at Late Night Fights, link in the description below. With Chimaev being such a fan favorite, he has too much star power to not fight exclusively on UFC pay-per-views. His past 5 fights have all been numbered cards. That means, due to his current visa problems, he has to wait until the UFC holds a pay-per-view in Abu Dhabi until he can fight.
And I also know if you can't get to the US, we've got other arenas, but something is going on. And I don't know how badly you'd want to take a guy to another arena, build him up if you know you're just going to have this problem tomorrow, which is getting him back to the mainland.
It's put the UFC in a horrible position. They don't want a UFC champion who can only fight perhaps once a year, only in one specific region, and isn't able to appear in the US.
So what's next? Who specifically is next for him?
We'll see how this plays out here, but I want him to fight in the United States. I want him to fight for a title here in the US.
Just look at some of the other long-standing champions the UFC has. Alex Pereira has fought exclusively in America. Islam Makhachev has fought in Abu Dhabi, Australia, and America, while Valentina Shevchenko has competed in Singapore, Uruguay, and America. It's clear the UFC likes to parade their champions around the world while consistently having them compete in shows around the US. And is probably why they've been reluctant to give Chimaev a title shot. Because in any normal circumstances, someone like him would have been fast-tracked to the top. He's a superstar, an incredible personality, and from day one, the world knew what kind of fighter he was.
The guy's special. I've been in this game my whole life. I've never seen anything like him. He's special, he's different, he wants to fight again. So, you know, I've never been in a position where I'm like, who's next? How do we get him a fight? How do we get him over here? How do we do this? How do we do that? It's fun and I like it. And I think when you're a fight fan, a guy like this is the type of guy that you love to watch and follow and hate, you know, and whatever it might be. This guy is one of the most special fighters I've ever seen, if not the most special guy that I've ever come across.
Despite this, the roadblock with Kadyrov and his visa has been holding Chimaev back for years now because the UFC is clearly reluctant to give him a title shot. But now, that all may be about to change. With Donald Trump returning to the White House, there's hope that he may be the one to reignite Chimaev's career. Donald Trump's relationship with the UFC is probably far deeper than most MMA fans realize. It dates all the way back to 2001 when the UFC had just been taken over by Dana White and the Fertitta brothers and was in a risky position.
My partners and I bought the UFC and it was basically considered a blood sport. State Athletic Commission didn't support us. Arenas around the world refused to host our events. Nobody took us seriously. Nobody. Except Donald Trump. Donald was the first guy that recognized the potential that we saw in the UFC and encouraged us to build our business. He hosted our first 2 events at his venue. He dealt with us personally. He got in the trenches with us, and he made a deal that worked for everyone. On top of that, he showed up for the fight on Saturday night and sat in the front row.
And Trump wasn't just in it for publicity or to make money himself, because the UFC was incredibly controversial back then. Instead, Trump was an actual fight fan from the beginning.
I get to watch as much as I can. It's, you know, highly competitive stuff. You know that better than me.
Yeah, like even back then in 2001, you hosted it, but I knew you were a fan because the very next event, UFC 32, was at the Meadowlands, and you showed up as just a fan.
As the years went on, his friendship with Dana White grew. Dana began appearing at numerous Trump rallies during both of his elections. He invited Dana to the White House and sat cage-side at numerous UFC events.
And they are all rising inside T-Mobile Arena to pay their respects.
The MMA fans as a whole clearly love Donald Trump. He and Dana are close, and he is a legitimate fan of the UFC. Some out there even think the UFC as a whole helped Trump significantly in getting elected.
In other countries, like if you watch soccer in Europe, they don't talk about anything political.
Right.
And I know you're saying there's no campaigning going on, but let's be honest. I think a lot of credit needs to go to Dana White, Joe Rogan, and the UFC for getting Trump reelected. I think
Joe's taking way too much credit on this, but go ahead.
The UFC fan base are very in support of Trump. And I think seeing him at those events, seeing your favorite fighter come up and essentially say, this is my hero, that goes a long way to an 18-year-old kid.
Now, the hope is that Trump can lift whatever sanctions or obstacles have stopped Chimaev from fighting in the US. As president, he'll certainly have the power too. And while it may seem like Trump has far bigger fish to fry as president than worrying about a visa for a UFC fighter, Chimaev himself seems to think this is a major turning point.
Are you able to fight anywhere but the Middle East? Because that's a concern some people have. Like, can you fight anywhere in the world? Can you fight in the U.S.?
Of course.
You can.
Yeah, let Donald Trump win the fight now, so I will be there.
Providing it all comes to fruition and Chimaev can compete in the US once again, there's no reason why Chimaev can't become more active, get that elusive UFC title shot, and fulfill the potential we all know he has. And to understand how Chimaev found himself in this position in the first place, check out this deep dive on his relationship with Kadyrov, which runs deeper than one might think.